You two guys shut up for a second. Let me welcome everybody to the UGASports Live podcast. My name is Roddy Nabulsa. I'm joined by Brent Rollins of Pro Football Focus, which apparently now wants to be called PFF because they think they're as big as KFC and can just drop everything and everybody knows who they are. Mr. Collinsworth getting all badass. Oh, no, yeah, we know. Everybody knows us. I mean, you're going from now you're just going to go by Kanye or something like that.
I mean, all 32 NFL teams,
I don't
80 FBS teams.
You see how he rattles that off so quickly?
Look at who our client list is. Oh, my goodness. And then, of course, we have Dayne Young, one of the video gurus at UGAsports.com, one of the co-authors of our weekly piece, Film Don't Lie. He and Brent put that together. It's one of our highest engaged pieces at UGAsports.com, where basically they go back and armchair quarterback the entire thing, which is not true. I tease them about it, but they actually do a good breakdown of here's what happened on each play. Not each play, but on some of the big plays. Here's the good things, here's the bad things. And it really helps you get an idea of what's going on. You know, when people say, oh, well, they shouldn't do an inside run, and these guys show, well, why an inside run works. Or, hey, they should run outside, and they show why the outside run works, you know. Or, hey, this guy, you know, this was a bad pass, and you showed that the ball was tipped, or the wrong route was run, or stuff like that. In other words, if you want to understand Georgia football, you need to come to UGAsports.com, where it's 50% off right now. Or you can get it for $0. You can pay $75, get a $75 gift card to Adidas.com and read Film Don't Lie. They do it each week. It won't be just an in-season thing. We'll do some stuff out of the season as well. So sign up so I can continue to pay them the peanuts that I do. Speaking of paying, big shout-out to all of our sponsors on the show here. We have Athens Ford, Aaron Overhead Doors, Your Pie, Academia Brewing Company, Cable East, and 365 Game Day. We are on the 365 Game Day Facebook page. Give them a like if you would. It is the holiday season. Christmas is going to be here. You have Georgia people on your list or, fans of other schools. If you go to 365 Game Day site, you can get some great gear for the family. Great place to hook them up. We are live at Baxter. We're live at Champions on Baxter Street. Probably one of the best places to come this Saturday for if you're going to watch the Georgia Tech game. If you don't want to go down to
and why would you?
I was going to be ugly, but it's Thanksgiving. So if you don't want to go down to Georgia Tech in that hellhole that is Grant Field.
Other than just to paint the town red. I've heard that.
It just the parking there is tough. You know, tailgating there is tough. So it's and especially for a noon game, come to Champions on Baxter Street. You know, get some different food. They'll have the tamales here. They'll have great salads. You know, and they have the sausage plate stuff because you're gonna be stuffed.
The sausage plate app is
just
beyond
right. So come here, watch the game on Saturday, and then if you want to come back on Sunday and watch all the NFL stuff while the family's out shopping, this is a good place to come. So swing by here. Guys, let's turn our attention to this past week. Georgia wins a football game. You wouldn't know it, but they actually beat Texas A&M. So a pretty good team by a lot of people's accounts. People look at the fact that they had, 3 losses coming in, and they're, it's a 3-loss team. But people don't look at who the hell they lost to.
And an improving team. They've gotten better pretty much each week that they've played.
Gotten some confidence recently, too.
A very Jimbo Fisher-esque. You know, it's like, hey, it's not overnight, but they build, and especially towards the end of the season, his teams are usually playing some of their best football. So they had Georgia had an inconsistent game. You saw flashes of what they can do on offense, and then you just saw complete ineptitude.
Yes.
So kind of give me your overall thoughts. And the defense was lights out. Let's give them credit. Going up against the best quarterback they've seen all year, in my opinion. Defense was lights out. But that was just – you win, but you're frustrated.
Yes.
You know, you're like –
Well, because I think a lot of it was you felt like, especially mid to late second quarter, that, all right, we should be up like 24-0 right now.
A lot of points left on the field, yeah.
And utterly dominating the game, especially defensively. But you just had shots that you plays that were there to be made, big plays that were there to be made that you just missed. You just flat
and
missed.
ones that historically the last couple of years Georgia has completed. And quite frankly, Jake Fromm has completed. The one to Brian Herrien along the sideline, that wouldn't have been a touchdown, I don't think.
No, definitely
but it would have got him down to the 5-yard line.
Because when you look at
the safety, I think would have been
look
there.
at from the back, there's like no one near him, and he's pretty fast, and he'll dive from 9 yards out to get into the end zone. Let's give him credit there.
Well,
you don't think he would have scored on that?
On film, don't lie. Our point was everyone's talking about the George Pickens miss off the flea flicker. And, yes, that was a miss, and, yes, that probably should have been a completion. But that's a tougher play to make than the one that he missed to Brian Harrion along the sideline. Harrion, I mean, that ball was probably 5 or 6 yards out of bounds.
Yes, and that might be – and it wasn't the first pass of the game, but it was very much, all right, is the weather an issue there? Because it instantly sailed out of bounds. But it was very much one of those ones where, as a coach, you would be like, all right, we don't need to make a perfect throw here. We need to make a completion.
Yeah.
As opposed to, hit him and then stride and scoring. So, but it was just that. It was a game of missed opportunities. And obviously Texas A&M is a very quality team. And you look at what they've done, they hung around. They hung around enough. And when you hang around and then you get one play or one drive, because that's basically what they had, was one drive, now you're confident. Now you're in a game.
You also look at the trend of how teams are playing Georgia on defense now. So it's very much, let's load up the box. We're going to try to stop you from running, or at least discourage you from running, and go one-on-one with your receivers, because quite frankly, we don't respect them. We don't think that they're going to win their matchups, and we don't think that you're going to throw the ball downfield enough that it's going to force us to change how we're playing. A&M definitely did that. You saw Auburn do that some, and I expect that's probably what Georgia Tech and LSU, going forward, whoever it is after that, I think that's what they're going to do too. It's going to be one-on-one on the outside.
Specifically LSU.
Yeah.
Because they have the talent. They have,
especially with Stingley, my God.
Stingley, Fulton, Delpit, they have a secondary that is really, really good in terms from a talent perspective. But, when we think about it, in the end, what happened here? You went through a 4-game gauntlet where 3 of the opponents had a bye week, and you came out 4-0.
Yeah.
If you break the sort of season down into thirds, that was or break it down in any way you can. That was a big stretch to where, okay, that's distracting a little bit, but that's But anyway, you break the season down into pieces, and what do you want? In the end, you want 4-0. You want to control your own destiny for the college football playoff, and you're there. That's where you are.
Now, later this evening, the football playoff committee will announce their top, teams. I've seen some pundits, and by the time a lot of people listen to this on their drive home tomorrow or over the weekend, this may be old news, but I don't think that it'll be dated to the fact that some people said Georgia should not be in the top 4. Your thoughts?
Whether should be or not, I think they will be.
I think they will be because they've been there. But
the precedent set that they're there.
I don't. To me, it doesn't matter. I never really look too much at what they do.
But when you look at what Alabama's doing, and you see some of these teams that are also a one-loss team, and you go, well, which is the best one-loss team out there? And now here's my thing: is like if they were good enough last week to be number 4. Alabama beating up a nobody and you taking on a strong team and having in the rain and having to hold them off, that to me isn't worth flipping.
No, I think
it doesn't matter.
Quo. No,
I think the irrelevance is that if Georgia wins the next 2 games, they are in the college football playoff, period. If they lose one of the next 2 games, they are out of the college football playoff, period.
Yeah, I think that's...
Now get out of here with your facts and figures.
I think the only interesting part about tonight will be how they put Alabama, Utah, Oklahoma. Those three one-loss teams and how they rank those one-loss teams will be the most intriguing thing about how.
Now, I will say, I am not in the camp that Alabama's out of this thing completely, and I've seen that a lot. Especially if Utah were to lose in the Pac-12 championship.
Yes.
Oklahoma, if they keep sputtering and stumbling around. I mean, Alabama's a really, really good football team. And they're not going to have the opportunity to play their way in. But if other people play their way out, Alabama's sitting there.
That's the key, playing your way out. Because what does Oklahoma have to do? For the most part, they're going to have to play Baylor again in the Big 12 championship, which is very difficult. They were down 28-3 initially when they first played them, so it's not like that's a chalk it up as a win. Utah is going to play a tough Oregon team in the Pac-12 championship. You could get exactly that, playing yourself out more so than playing yourself in. But hey, Georgia wins 2 games, they're in the playoff.
Also, if Alabama goes on the road and whoops up on Auburn the way that I don't think really any team can do,
the eye test.
If they beat Auburn by 30 in Jordan-Hare, And that's one of the more impressive wins of the season for anybody.
Here's the interesting question from Phil Rogers. He says, Rod, if we lose to LSU, who do we play in the Sugar Bowl?
Does anyone,
the best TV matchup? The best made-for-TV matchup?
I mean, more importantly, how do you motivate a team for that anyway? You saw it last year.
Again.
You won't.
It's just hard.
I can't tell you the number of fans I know who are, Texas fans who still throw that in Georgia's face. And I come across as a homer saying, look, they didn't care. Oh, no. And they like to go back and show in our own reporting these players saying, yeah, we're really excited about this. I'm like, what the hell did you expect them to say? We were telling you, because I did a series from notes from Bourbon Street while we were down there about the lack of enthusiasm, not just from the players, but from the fans, from everybody down there. It felt like something they had to go through. They had to do it. You saw a couple guys who had the option of playing in that game, didn't do it. They're like, no, I'm fine. And
that sets the tone. And
it
sets
does,
the tone. And it is. I think I can't remember the exact stat. It's either one. So how many years? This 5 years now of the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. I think they're 1-4. The team that's finished 5th. In the bowl game. It's just hard when you're that close and you're the next in line. It's just hard to get up for that bowl game.
I mean, because what you had was so exciting. Now you're settling for second best, and you just can't get motivated about playing that game, especially against the Texas team. You don't have any animosity towards them. It's not like you're playing somebody that you've known. It's like if Georgia had a chance, say, to play Alabama in that, in a bowl game, or a Clemson or an Ohio State, or somebody who's like, oh, yeah, we know all those guys. We went to camps with all those guys. This is going to be an interesting matchup, and all of a sudden they start playing for the G on their chest, and they get all excited. That might matter, but it's like, hey, you're playing West Virginia.
Hey, now.
I'm not knocking
on my
But would Georgia care? No. Hey, you're playing Baylor.
Go Neil Brown.
They don't give a damn. So it's like if you're either playing for something or you're playing. And at that point, it becomes a job to a lot of these guys.
In the offseason, I did the podcast Dog Days, where I would speak with former players and just kind of get their full spectrum of experiences. And Amarlo Herrera told me, do you remember the pooch kick Coach wrote against Georgia Tech to kind of bring this back?
Yeah.
He said
let's rub salt in that wound.
Yeah, the thing that made not necessarily players, but especially players' families the most upset about that is that sent Georgia to a bowl game where they were playing just a couple days after Christmas. So they did not get Christmas at home. I believe they were in Charlotte, if my years are right.
Belk Bowl.
For the Belk Bowl, which that was against Todd Grantham, and that worked out pretty well.
Yes.
But even then, some of those guys had been recruited by Todd Grantham, and there's some interest there, and a couple guys said, hey, I need to show out for the NFL.
Was that the BMAC game? Or no?
No, I think
that was the Nick Chubb running wild game.
Yes, that's right.
John Lilly, I think, was offensive coordinator for that one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Shout out to John
anyway, what Herrera told me is that his grandma was not happy that they lost to Georgia Tech sent him to the Belk Bowl because it could have been a couple of days later to get a New Year's Day, and then they wouldn't have had to miss that time with their families.
Well, think about Amarlo not getting grandma pumpkin pie or some stuff like that. I'm sure Amarlo Herrera was pissed off. We got a couple questions from folks I do want to mention. They're saying, hey, where's Jake Roos and Jim Donnan? They are visiting family. It is Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I don't like my family, so I'm here, of course. I'm trying to avoid them as much as possible. Although
we were just hanging out outside.
Yeah, I had to work this week.
I found a couple guys out here working.
I had class this week.
Yeah, loser.
Unfortunately,
but you're the teacher, right?
Yes.
Nerd. I don't know, man. We got a pretty good crowd in here. Shout out to everybody who came to watch the show. I really appreciate it. We will have Jim Donnan and Jake Roos back next week. You two guys will be back on the unemployment line, selling pencils on the side of the road, or oranges. Oranges are big this time of year. Sell oranges at the interstate. So if you have questions, go ahead and send them in. We'll try to get to them. Phil says, just get a better bowl than the Gator Bowl. Yeah, I have to agree with him there. I want to give a big shout out to our friends over at Athens Ford. They are
that one's.
It means a lot to us that the folks at Athens Ford actually sponsor the podcast and the website. It's there's huge Georgia fans. I know we drive some people in there. I don't know if it's worth it for what they do for us, but it's Thanksgiving time, so if you'll bear with me this week if I spend a little time talking about our how much we appreciate the sponsorships that we have. We don't charge a whole lot. But I don't know if we sent anybody their way. We've sent a few, but the main reason the folks at Athens Ford sponsor our show is we said, look, we want to do a Georgia football podcast, specific to Georgia football, and the folks out there are huge Georgia football fans. And they're like, yeah, if we can help, and of course we said, hey, we're going to have Coach Donnan on it. They're like, we definitely want to help,
Yes.
So they like to get his takes, and that's 99% of the reason they do it. But, again, it's just when we said Georgia football, those are the magic words, and they jumped on board. So if you need a vehicle, you need to replace one, you need to get a new one. You like me, you got a 15-year-old who's going to be 16-year-old who's going to be looking for a car at some point.
Watch out, Athens.
Yeah. March 5th, y'all need to don't go out that day. just stay your asses at home. But March 5th next year, just stay home. But when you're looking for a vehicle, you can get it anywhere, and there's some, there's some guys in town who are former football players that own car dealerships. I'm not telling you not to go there, but if you want to go to someplace who supports your football team through actions, deed, money, and every year they do a great job taking care of the community. I was out there last year, the year before, they had bikes everywhere, bicycles. So like everybody that bought a car, Athens Ford donated a bike to kids in need. They do toy drives, they do clothing drives, they do all kinds of sorts of stuff out there. So big shout out to Athens Ford for their charity work, and part of that charity work is the charity they give to UGASports.com to do this show and bring it to you. Without them, we would not be here, so we really appreciate it. Of course, if you would share this with all your friends, we'd greatly appreciate it. And do you have any other questions from from UGA Sports? Now, people ask me, where do we ask our questions? Do we ask them on Facebook? Do we ask them on YouTube? Priority is going to go to the dog vent, because those are people who are members of our site. So we're going to give them first priority, so hit those questions there.
This is from ZXBY140. To my untrained eye, the A&M game, it seemed like the most diverse that Georgia's running game has been in terms of differing running plays. What do you guys think with your trained eyes in regard to diversity in the running game?
I wouldn't know that I would agree from an overarching standpoint, but it was very much there. And here's the thing that's interesting with that is they're being a lot more diverse in the running game because they have to be.
Yeah.
Because just running inside zone and using the mammoth linemen that they have has not been as successful as it has been in the past, or it was earlier in the season. They're starting to get to where, hey, it's 2-3 yards of carry in that realm. Well, now when you have that, you have to create plays. You're still a running football team by choice almost, but by talent-wise. And because of that, you've now had to scheme the quick toss that we see a lot of. The pop pass to Demetrius Robinson, folks, is basically like a jet sweep. Mm-hmm. So a lot of various things that they're doing in the running game. And actually, Coach Coley has actually brought a lot of different schemes from a running perspective to the offense. Now it's just a matter of, to me, putting them all together in one game.
I want to interject something here to answer the question. And again, I'm nowhere nearly as trained as these guys are. They see stuff far faster than I do. But when I'm seeing what Coach Donnan pointed out, all the pulling guards, pulling tackles,
yes.
We have not seen that all year. All of a sudden, second half of the season, they're pulling like crazy. A lot misdirection. They tried misdirection on that first play of the game, and it got blown up. Sometimes, giving the linebackers a little eye candy hurts you.
Well, I think that was the first play of the game issue more so than the actual play itself.
It was but they're trying different things.
Yes, very much so.
But guess what happens when you try stuff new midway through the season? You have some execution issues. Yeah. You have some missed blocks. You have some issues that go wrong. It's like, hey, we spent, 5 weeks of fall camp working on these packages, these personnel groupings, these plays. Now we're going to try something a little bit different, which you have to evolve, because people will scheme you for what you do, your tendencies. Like you said, you have to have your tendency awareness of yourself. Mm-hmm. And they have coaches on that staff who every week say, break down Georgia. How would you attack us?
Go back to that Vanderbilt game and look at how Georgia's running mentality was just, we're going to run through your ass.
Yeah.
And that's not the way it is all the time now. They're having to do different things, but it's for multiple, really a variety of reasons. Some of it's just injuries up front. Some of it is that the talent is better that they're going against. If you go back and look at the Texas A&M game, Solomon Kinley had a rough job. And I'm not saying he didn't do a good job. I'm saying he had a tough task.
Yeah.
And they've had that for a few weeks now when you go back to a Derek Brown and a Marlon Davidson, or when you go back to Florida.
Go back to Kinlaw at South Carolina.
Oh, my gosh. I mean,
those three players, Derek Brown, Matabuke from A&M, and Kinlaw, those are 3 of the top 12 interior defenders in the nation, period. I mean, they're just that good and will be first and or second round picks.
But LSU doesn't have one.
No, they do not. That is very true.
Georgia Tech does not have one.
No, they do not.
You want to know why Georgia's a 29-point favorite this week?
Sorry.
That's part of it.
Very much so.
Phil's it's going to be Nick. Says, how about a UGA Sports SEC Championship tailgate or party? I'm going to the game and can't wait. We could have a UGA Sports tailgate party before the SEC Championship game. We just got to find a place to do it. So,
there you go. Good suggestion.
Jill Parker Babb says, any word on Jamar Gibbs out of Dalton, Georgia, led the state in rushing, AJC Offensive Player of the Year. Gibbs is a highly, highly coveted back. A lot of teams are going after him.
Late bloomer, right?
Very, very late bloomer.
Yes.
And he is the bloody poster child for guys that I say, look, we start covering kids when they start picking up offers, or we know we're going to get offers. We start talking to D'Angelo Gibbs and Dominic Blaylock as 8th graders. You just knew that it was. I remember, or Robert Kimdichie. I mean, he was we spoke to him in 8th grade. Hell, he might have been going into the 8th grade. He may have been a 7th grader. But you knew this kid was going to be a monster. There's some guys that pop out like that. Then there's some guys who, I don't know, wait till their senior season to really put it all together. Guys put on an extra 10 pounds of muscle, 20 pounds. They get faster. They dial into what their coaches are doing. They're the late bloomers. In other words, if a guy's getting offers in his senior year, it doesn't mean that he wasn't any good. It happens. Look at Eric Stokes. They took him at the last possible second. We broke our recommendation, or we found out 11 p.m. the night before signing day that he was coming to Georgia.
Look at what they've done with Tay Crowder in the program.
Just saying.
I covered him in high school, and he was a good player. He is not built then like he is now. They have completely transformed his body.
And you see the guys that look fantastic, and they get here and they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And it happens. I know you want to say something.
I'll say no. Gibbs, though, he's interesting.
Gibbs is a very interesting guy. The only, if I have a knock on Gibbs, is he's not a big guy. He is a smaller back. Not tiny, just saying he's not big. So you've got Kendall Milton coming in. You're going to have Zamir White, kind of your power back. Then you got a James Cook. You go back to McIntosh. Where does Gibbs fit into that group? So, updates. He's still looking around. Last I checked, and again, Jake would be able to answer this question a lot better than I could. I'm just wondering where he is on Georgia's list of guys they want. You're still wondering what Evans is going to do.
It's interesting.
He's all over the place.
That one.
Then you got the kid out of Colquitt. That they really like, Dejan. So I don't know where he is on Georgia's pecking order. I think if Georgia went in hard on him, they could get him.
Yeah.
But are they even going to take 2 backs? For almost a year, we're like Georgia's taking 2 backs. Georgia's taking 2 backs. But with James Cook not getting hardly any reps. McIntosh looks not getting a whole lot. That you may need, 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks. We just had Phil. He's down in Jacksonville, the home of Carson Beck. Is Carson Beck the only quarterback you're going to take in this class? I think that's a bad idea. I think you need 2.
Especially with the uncertainty of what DeJuan Mathis' health status. It is a.
And if Jake Fromm returns.
I'm about to say you could be down 2 quarterbacks.
There's a great article on the website about that, actually.
Just saying that there's some issues there. Yeah, there's some issues there. So,
but in terms of the late bloomer part, and going hard on those late, you say, hey, can you get Gibbs if you go hard at him? There's one guy that Georgia. I saw a story. I think it was this week or even last week that Georgia went hard after late in the process, but didn't get because they weren't the first ones in the boat. And somebody that they would really enjoy to have right now, and that's Rashad Bateman at Minnesota from Tifton, and who is doing a lot of some amazing things up there, who didn't really bloom as a receiver until his senior year, but is very much – and he stayed – they offered him in a camp, I think it was, Minnesota did. They were the first ones, and he
Well, that's also part of it. Is a lot of kids, they get an offer and then it's a non-committable offer. It's like, hey, and for people that don't understand this, like, well, this kid had a Georgia offer. Doesn't mean that he can actually commit and take up a spot. A lot of guys, a lot of teams, Georgia ain't the only one to do this. Trust me, Alabama's patented this. Hey, you have an offer, and what's not said in the media, if you continue to progress at the rate that you are. Right now, you are a 6'2", 250-pound, interior defensive lineman as a freshman. Your dad's 6'5", we think you're going to wind up about 6'3" and a half by the time you're a senior, 278, 290, in that range. You continue to grow, get faster, get your techniques down. You have an offer. We're letting you know that we want you to come play college football at Georgia we want you to come to camp. So a lot of that happens. And when you see a guy blow up and they go, well, he had a Georgia offer. He didn't have an offer at the time. And then some kids are used like, hey, we're going to hold a spot open for you forever. So
to your point about running backs, though, in recruiting, especially at Georgia with the talent that they always tend to have on the roster at running back, a lot of it comes down to who can complement who's currently here best. I think back to Brian Harrion, that came a little bit out of nowhere. And it's like, okay, Brian Harrion's on this team, and look how well he complements really what they've had for the last 3 years, that he found ways onto the field because he did something a little different than Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel. He did something different than DeAndre Swift. And now he's the second back.
Which is my thing about Gibbs is, is he not James Cook?
Potentially.
Which is why I'm like, are you going to do it? Now, don't get me wrong. I'd be happy to have two James Cooks, but I don't know if they.
I would think, though, that they would want more of the speed back for another spot because you do have McIntosh and Zamir White who tend to be more the power runners.
All right, let's hit a couple questions here real quick. Over-under this is from Ronnie Brown. Over-under on 20-plus yard runs for Swift on Saturday.
If we're setting the line?
Yeah, over-under.
3.5?
Yeah, I was going to say 3.
I'm going to say 2.
It also depends. All right, so this is a question that we got on the dog vent as well. Do you think that DeAndre Swift has been on a pitch count? And this is kind of something that we talked about because he's averaging
100%.
How many yards per carry? It's over 5, right?
Right at that.
Yeah, right at 5.
Well, it's 5 in interior, right? Then.
Oh, what we had I put that on there. His outside, if he's outside at right tackle or outside.
That's the whole team, right? Or was that just Swift?
No. That was the whole team. That was the whole team, Dave. Yes,
so Georgia inside runs are picking up 5 yards. Outside runs are picking
7 to 7.5.
So, but Swift, if you check out the Watch Along show with Jim Dunn, we're going to do that again this Saturday at noon. Every time Swift has 2 good runs back to back, he comes out of the game. Mm-hmm. Drives Coach Dunn crazy.
Yeah,
he's like, "Why are you taking him out?" Ball ain't that heavy. He had 18 carries this past week. This is a guy who can get – now, maybe it's his own doing. He's like, hey, got to save tread on the tires for the NFL. I don't believe it, but, and remember, this is a guy who's battled injury, especially in that groin area, for years, at least 2 years I can think of. So maybe they're like, hey, we got to keep him healthy. We've got other backs who can do this, let's put them in the game. But when you see Zamir White get in there and line up on the wrong side and you have a busted play, you're like, where was Swift on that? Where was Harrion on that? So I get it. So do I think he's on his pitch count? It feels that
this
way.
Week. He ideally in a best case scenario, he is on this week.
Yes,
that he's in the 10 to
this
12
is a great
touch
week for that.
10 to 12 touch week, and then it's all right, whatever is needed in the following week.
I like this question from Dion Ware. It says, how do we stay out of 3rd and long? This is the biggest obstacle to our offense.
I may or may not have an opinion on this, right?
You've been beating this drum for a while.
It's a drum that I continually to beat, and that is, I think, 2nd and 7+. If you take out the service academies, the Army Navies of the world, Georgia is the 3rd highest team in the country in terms of percentage of runs on 2nd and 7+. I think I had something on Sunday's piece on the site where 9 of the 13 2nd and 7+ plays were runs, none of which resulted in a first down. So, when you do that, you're going to live and die by 3rd down. And it's just very difficult for an offense.
Yeah, go back to that Florida game. It worked then.
Yes. You were great on third down then, and great. Yeah. And Jake's been great on third down. I think he's one of the top 10 graded quarterbacks on our site in terms of his third down grade. He's been great, way better, by the way, than Joe Burrow.
But look what happened this past week when at one point I think Georgia was 3 of 13 on third down. It was just
you're playing with fire when you're living and dying. It's like the three ball in the NBA and in basketball. A lot of times you're playing with fire if you just live by that, if that's your identity. But there was a guy that I always listened to, Mike Lombardi, that does a lot of NFL stuff. He always reckoned it to Canadian football. Like they try to get first downs on first and second down, and they live and try to stay out of third down at all costs.
Oh, that makes sense. What do we got here, Terry?
My grandson. Got two of my grandsons here.
All right.
Awesome.
They ought to Tech Week question.
Yeah. We got a live question here from Terry, who's here at Champions on Baxter. Hopefully he's having this patty melt that we got in front of us with his two grandsons.
I was going to ask this to Donna. Him not here might even be better. How do you think the history of University of Georgia football would have changed if we'd had replay 2000 on?
No, that's a good question. Terry wants to know how would the history of the University of Georgia changed if they had the replay back in 2000, or 2000 on. And I can answer this question. Coach Donnan wouldn't probably just hemmed and hawed around it, but I will tell you for a fact that Jim Donnan would probably still be coaching. Maybe not this late into the game, but
tenure would have been extended.
His tenure would have been extended, and he'll tell you, and he's not bitter about it. I mean, he's very, very upfront about it, and he says, look, remember, this is his team. When he talks about Georgia, he says us, we, our.
He is see the passion on the watch along. See it.
The guy screams for Georgia. He bleeds for Georgia. It's not a show. It's not an act. I've been to his house. There's Georgia stuff everywhere. The guy loves it. He's also called by all these NFL guys, and I've been sitting with him on the phone. And I look over, and I'm like, oh, Bill Belichick's calling. Guys like that. He's just – people still respect him in the business because of his acumen. And you hear it on the show. You see it on the watch-along. But he says that you can't lose to Georgia Tech 3 times in a row. And when you had a situation where you had a fumble that wasn't two of them that, replay would have had an effect on – maybe,
you assume that. And remember, I wouldn't always assume replay's going to get it right.
But
depends on the call on the field.
Yeah, exactly. So you have a situation where you could have had a big difference. So, it's see the Saints fumble in 98. The Hamilton non-fumble in 99. I get it.
In Florida, Saints fumble in Florida.
Well, I'm with you there. I'm just saying it would have changed a lot. Again, you don't know how long Coach would have coached, but it would have changed a lot on the perception of him. And remember, he was getting calls from a lot of teams wanting him to come back,
sure,
or come coach their team. So maybe he's taking a job somewhere else. I doubt it. Again, the guy came here, loved it. His family loves it.
He's still in Athens.
That's
all I'm saying.
Did his tenure at ESPN. But if we talk about wishes and nuts, you wish you'd had it back then. At the same time, though.
If you're a hell of a recruiter and you're beating your rivals, that tends to make your administrators happy.
But,
very much so.
You also fired a 10-win Mark Richt.
Yeah.
But again, he couldn't win the big ones. Kirby Smart, to his effect, as much as people are pissed off about the way the offense looks.
Yes.
He's 10-1 right now. Chance to go 11-1 for what, the third year in a row?
Yes. Florida, Auburn, Tech.
Yeah,
he's handling that business.
It's so funny how that works. The classic example is, what if Drew Brees gets medically cleared to play for the Dolphins and Nick Saban succeeds with the Dolphins instead of getting Dante Culpepper? Does he ever go to Alabama? What if Steve Spurrier succeeds with the Redskins and never goes to South Carolina? Does Rick struggle with South Carolina at all? Probably not.
Yeah.
Steve Spurrier took that program to new heights. So,
I want to give this question.
That's a great future article podcast, the what ifs.
Oh yeah,
all the what ifs.
Donnan would be wonderful to give us some of those what ifs.
Yes.
I want to put him on the spot.
yeah. Thanks.
Save it for next time.
There you
go. Jimmy Weekly says, is Jake Fromm going to stay for his senior year? I've been saying since the first day of fall camp, I expected him to stay his senior year, but I tell you though, to me, what changes Jake Fromm is not his recent struggles. Quarterbacks go through that. He was at a ridiculous pace at the beginning of the season. Our Dave McMahon, our sports statistician guy who does all the stats for like CBS broadcasts and things, when he does his stats each week, when he shows that you got a quarterback at the highest completion percentage of any Georgia quarterback, through 6 games, 7 games. It's pretty blatant. You almost expect there to be a downside to that. How is it that Aaron Murray and Eric Zier couldn't keep up that pace, and knowing that you were going to face tougher teams towards the end of the season? It happens. I didn't expect him to be under 50% for his last 3 games. I thought that'll come down a little bit. What's going to affect him is, does he think, can he get any better? Can he develop, will stick around another year, make him a better quarterback for the NFL? Will it increase his draft status? Or will he win a title?
I'll say my answer to that question would be, as a Georgia fan, you probably hope he doesn't. Because if he doesn't, that means he's won the next 2 weeks.
Well, that's
won
my point.
The 2 games after that and riding off into the sunset with a title.
If he wins a title, then it's like, okay, I've done everything I came to Georgia to do. I'll move on to the NFL. If he doesn't win a title, that is a guy who's, to me, said it from day one, will come back because he wants to win a title at Georgia. He knows the NFL will be there. It's not going anywhere. It's not a limited time thing. They'll get, I'm sure the Froms will have injury insurance, and then, talk about beating the drum. Beating the drum about loss of draft stock insurance, where if you are a first or second rounder, you can get insurance saying if something happens, you get injured, like Tua, and you drop to the 5th or 6th round, there's an insurance policy that kicks in for the loss of draft status, So you get him both those, and that's something Georgia should pay for. I mentioned the Froms, but, that's if you want your juniors to stay, you go to Isaiah Wilson, you go to Andrew Thomas, you go to all these young guys and say, hey, if you stick around a year, we've got you insured, So
I think it comes down to what motivates Jake Fromm, because I think his draft grade is going to be about the same this year or next, mainly based on the competition of the quarterbacks around him. He will not be selected higher than Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields if they're healthy. He will not be selected higher this year than Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow. Tua, I have no idea. It depends on injury risk at that point, and some franchises will be more averse to that and would rather trust Jake Fromm. Some are say, we trust Tua and let's go. So I think he'll be the 3rd or 4th or 5th quarterback, regardless of which year he goes. So to me, if Jake's motivation is to be a all-time Georgia legend and be the all-time winningest quarterback, get back to another postseason next year potentially, Georgia's got the team and the talent to win the East again next year for sure. And then after that, you never know.
I want to give a big shout out to our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors. Again, this is another group of folks that came on. We mentioned that we want to do a Georgia podcast. They jumped on it right off the bat. Ryan Lucia and the friends over at Aaron Overhead Doors, gigantic Georgia fans. Again, one of our only sponsors says, hey, it's worth if you're a Georgia fan, we'll give you 10% off of our services to you, and that's what Ryan Lucia and the folks at Aaron Overhead Doors will do. Also, they do charity work as well. How many overhead door companies do you think of? It's like, what? They actually have the employees. And remember, they don't use contractors. They use actual employees, people who are, answer to Ryan, and, they have the Aaron Overhead Doors logo on their chest. That they work for that company. They don't work for a new company, 5 days a week, a different person. So they actually say, hey, I know this person at my church who needs their door fixed or need this work done, on their house. I know this person, who's a member of the community that is down on their luck and they need some stuff done. So they actually do charity work within their realm, and they were honored by it at a national convention. So the word's gotten out that the good charitable work that our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors do, and we are very thankful to them. We're thankful that they sponsor the podcast. We're thankful that they give 10% off to Georgia fans. Again, You can lie. Cool. You can lie. It's between you and God. If you want to lie that you're a Georgia fan, if you're a Clemson fan, you call them up and tell them you're a Georgia fan. You can do it. It's
impressive nonetheless.
They're not going to double check you, but the fact that they would do that, we really, really appreciate it.
Got a question from Keeper Dog from the Dog Vent. Says, as you evaluate the execution of Georgia's offense, what are the little things that seem to be missing? We've talked about Fromm's footwork or receiver separation, offensive creativity, but the execution issues look deeper than that. If game reps are indicative of practice reps, do we believe that this team is undisciplined in practice on offense? My quick answer is there's nothing about a Kirby Smart program that is undisciplined. One.
Especially in practice. I've seen that myself.
2, I do think it's execution things, and I think it's a lot of things that are so close to breaking. We saw it against Auburn that there were probably 2 or 3 runs that if one extra block is made, DeAndre Swift's running 30 yards.
Or a half block.
Or it's so small, the margins, and that's what we tried to touch on in our Film Don't Lie this week, is that the margins for Jake Fromm are so small from good to great, was how you put it. Or the margins for Georgia's blocking scheme, whether it's Eli Wolf coming around or whether it's Dominic Blaylock hitting an open field block. Those are the little things that happened last year that make Georgia's offense flow better.
Yeah, and it also comes down to me, offense is such an interesting thing from a not just execution, but feel. And it's rhythm, it's confidence. You saw it against Auburn where, hey, once we got rolling, the 3 drives you score, it's rolling, there's good feel, there's good vibes, there's confidence, there's a rhythm from the quarterback standpoint, especially the quarterback. And that, to me, is what's above all else is missing, is that rhythm confidence that just, hey, no matter what, we are going to succeed here. So it's very, in terms of the question, it's very, they are minute. They are very little, but I think you have, this week is a great week, hopefully a great week to get a lot of that rhythm, get a lot of that confidence back to where you're rolling into Atlanta with sort of peak performance from that standpoint.
Well, one thing, too, you've noticed on defense, a lot of the younger guys, the freshmen making impact now the last couple of games, whether it's Trayvon Walker or Tyreek Stevenson, they haven't had the luxury of that on offense. Those guys needed to be ready from game 1 this year based on the receivers, based on the tight ends. And so some of that, they're going to be coming around at that same rate. You're seeing George Pickens gain confidence. You're seeing Dominic Blaylock gain confidence. The tight end situation, Eli Wolf's been relied on a lot. And I think transferring in, a lot of people didn't know if he was even going to play.
Right.
Because he didn't catch many balls at Tennessee. And so I think there was so much transition with offensive skill players other than running back that it's taken this long to even try to gain a rhythm.
There's transition elsewhere, right? There's transition. You have a new offensive coordinator. Your 2 primary sort of brain trust guys are both gone. One's now currently the offensive coordinator at Colorado.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of turnover in general, and you just haven't found that rhythm yet completely.
No, you're right. Coach John has pointed out that a lot of those that same core group of receivers have been in and out. That has taken a while to get all of those guys on the field at the same time. You've had some injuries, and your top 4, top 5 options of receiver are all gone, and you switch them over. So, but that didn't seem to be that big an issue at the beginning of the season. They were completing some passes, and we actually have a lot of questions about what is Georgia going to do this weekend. I apologize if I don't have all the names right, but like Jonathan says, do you think the game plan Saturday will be more passing to build timing and confidence, or will it be more vanilla since Georgia should win handily?
I mean, that's a great question because
come on.
I think it can be both, right?
The part that stunned me there is the Georgia win handily part. I mean, obviously rivalry game, obviously you're more talented, but one, you never know. With your inconsistencies, you don't want to find yourself late in the second quarter and only and be up 13-3.
But he's got a good point. Do you work on the issues that you've had? It's like this is a team that you could run on.
Yes.
Your inside zone will work. Your outside zone will work.
Well, then you run on them. If you can run on them, then you run on them.
But you also, we've a couple people say, look, Jeff Ball says stay focused on Tech rather than looking forward to LSU. I don't think that the coaches are going to do that. I think it's a situation where it's like, look, if our guy's having issues hitting these passes, let's throw these passes and get it to work out.
I think you will see a predominantly passing game, at least in the first half. And you will see things that will try to get your quarterback in a great rhythm, try to build confidence, and really just string together a lot of first downs.
Jake Fromm goes 8 of 11, 1 touchdown, maybe 2. Then all of a sudden you just lean on them, which has been Georgia's plan. We saw it at Vandy. We saw it elsewhere. You don't have to do it with DeAndre Swift. You keep everybody rested, keep everybody safe, and then you work on LSU. I could see a pass to break them up a little bit because, again, we know that every team's going to say we got to stop the run. So they're going to dare you to pass. You do it. You build confidence in your quarterback. Get up a couple scores, maybe 3-4 scores, and then just lean on them. You bring out your heavy set and take it away from them. But
you could also argue that you flip that script and get the lead running the ball because you think you can. And then you pass it from there knowing you have the cushion of the game.
True, but then that's going to be something like you're trying to run the score up, and that's Tech.
It's Tech.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Either way, these past 2 games, or the past week against A&M and then this week against Tech, there are small things within each game that are great preparation for LSU. This past week against A&M, it was the best quarterback from a running, mobility and throwing perspective. And you saw the drive that A&M scored. They went empty. They said, hey, we're just throwing the ball and going 5, they put their 2 tight ends sort of inside, but they still went empty backfield and started chucking the ball around. That's preparing for what LSU is going to do. And then this week, Tech actually has some decently graded and solid players in the secondary. You're going to see a dynamic secondary against LSU. And Georgia Tech's running back, Jordan Mason, is one of the highest graded running backs in the nation. His grade is actually, from our perspective, is actually higher than Swift's. A lot of it, but primarily because of his ability to get yards after contact. I think like 84% of his yards have been after contact. And that's Edwards-Hilaire.
No, I get it. I would take Swift ahead of him, but it's.
Oh gosh, yes.
I know, but I just want to help.
That's the ACC.
I want to point out, folks, when you see that grade, it's on the fact that 84% come after contact. That is a hard kid to bring down. So he grades out well. It doesn't mean he's a better player. Please don't confuse grades for rankings.
No, it's production. It's production, and what exactly is happening on every single. It's not potential and ability.
And that's the thing.
Looking at what is being done.
Right. When we see quarterbacks, you're like, oh, well, he had a terrible game. Why is he at 80%? Well, there's also some things he did very well. He produced, and therefore his grades up. Or I remember, I think there was a Tua had a really big game where he threw a bunch of easy touchdowns.
Right, exactly.
Guys ran in. It's like, okay, he had 5 touchdowns, but he threw.
It's expected throws. Like you throw 3 bubbles that turn into 60-yard touchdowns. As a quarterback, you're getting the stats, but from a grading perspective,
stats are here. The grade is here, but then his wide receiver grade is up here because that kid bumped off somebody, broke a tackle, and run. So take some time. Don't bitch about the grades until you understand them. It took me a minute, so I get it. We had a question. Do you let Lawrence Cager play this week, or do you rest him for LSU?
I rest him.
No, you don't. He doesn't play.
All right.
I don't think
with that shoulder injury.
Because you're one hit. You're at one play every time he's out there from him being done for period.
We had another question. Does Jake Fromm trust his wide receivers?
I tend to think so, yes.
I tend to think no. And here's why I say that. I don't mean to say he doesn't trust them is not fair. I just think that if you look at Jake Fromm with Javon Wims, you look at him with Jeremiah Holloman, you look at him with Ridley, he seems to have an ex-receiver that he dials in on, that he trusts more than the others. When you hit Eli Wolf in the hands and he drops it, when you hit Tyler Simmons in the hands and he drops it, when you have a Demetrius Robertson short-arming a ball, when you hit Matt Landers short-arming a catch, he's got his preferences. Look how he leaned on Isaac Nada.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, crap's going sideways. Who am I going to throw to? Where's Isaac? He has a guy that he trusts more than the other. So does he trust his other guys? It's not that. I'll rephrase that. It's not that he doesn't trust them. He has his preferences and who he's comfortable with, and who are on the same page. And the way Lawrence Cager gets back to the spot where Jake likes to throw it, I think that's part of his – he's been around. He knows – again, it's not just a quarterback knowing his wide receiver. It's a wide receiver knowing his quarterback. He knows that when Jake throws this ball, it's usually a yard or two behind where I'm going to be on this play. So at the very end of his route, what does he do? He slams on, he puts one foot down and turns. Maybe he doesn't go in stride, expecting the ball to come over his left shoulder, on a right-hand route. He stops and turns around to his right, and the ball's right there. He's like, because this is where the ball always is in practice. What does that do for Jake? Jake's like, he always knows where I'm throwing it, and he goes back to him. So
I think the better question is which receivers do coaches trust? Because Jake's going to read the coverage and throw the ball where the ball needs to go. Yeah. And if the receiver doesn't make that, that's not on Jake at that point.
But it's very true. But there are other times he has he's got times like, I got 2 options here. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, if it's a blitz, you're going to throw to where it came from, so that doesn't matter. But there have been a couple times, and Coach Donald's mentioned on the show, he's like, why the blank are we throwing to that guy in that situation? Yeah. And to your point, I guarantee you Jake Fromm that wasn't his first preference, but that's where the coverage dictated the ball go. And
and we've seen coaches
you don't have 5 Lawrence Cagers out there. You've got a Lawrence Cager, a Ridley, and then then a Pickens, and then things get a little.
And you've seen that.
You see a lot of rotation at that point.
You've seen that evolve over the past 3 weeks in terms of who, from a coaching perspective, who's on the field.
Yeah.
And once Cager is out, which by the way, you 1,000,000% need him for the LSU game.
Yeah.
But once he's there, all right, who is now being trusted? And you've seen a lot more Kyrus Jackson recently, as opposed to others.
And what are they being trusted for? They really trust Tyler Simmons on run protection and being that blocking wide receiver.
Yes.
And he's among the top of the personnel group for that.
Yeah, I like Jonathan Williams' point here. It's not saying that we need him, but just wonder if it'd be good for him to go a couple of series and see the field a little before Atlanta. Yeah. Let him get out there, let him run around a little bit. Yeah, and trust me, the guy's a senior. He wants to get out there a little bit. I'd let him. Phil Rogers says, how many chop blocks will we see Saturday? I guarantee it's Tech.
Hey, Coach, I saw Coach Paul Johnson was tweeting last night about the Ravens game, talking about the traps and the things that they were running. He was quite excited about that.
I'm just saying, for the last 100 years, every first series of every Georgia Tech game, it seems they injure a Georgia defensive lineman. So just be prepared. Philip Jordan Wells says it's not the same offense anymore. Philip, I tend to agree with you.
The results speak for themselves.
They're running a lot of different stuff, and they're not. It's not. So everyone's demanding, hey, Coley, change offense. They change it, then they have execution issues. Hey, guess what? It's not something they've practiced for all year.
Well, philosophically, the points that I've sort of keep beating the drum with the fact that your 2nd and 7 running percentage is insanely high. Just from a success and all the data and the math and the analytics behind that, it's just not a very successful thing to continually do over and over again. No. The other thing is the minimal level of play action that they run. Those are big picture philosophical things. If you look at each individual play is an execution issue. Yep. But philosophically, those two things are the things that have to change.
I'm with you there. I'm not defending Coley and all that. I'm just saying sometimes be careful what you wish for.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, hey, let's. We saw this in maybe 3 games ago when they first started pulling Ben Cleveland and Jamari Sawyer and Cade Mays. These guys missed blocks. It's like, okay, well, great. Hey, you haven't run that trap. Then they ran a twist on you, and you didn't know who to pick up. It's like so that happens.
I think a lot of times fans play the result on that kind of stuff a lot because if you were the coach and this is your team, you're going to say, I've got one of the best running backs in the country who's going to be a really good NFL player. I've got the best left tackle in the country who is, in my opinion, one of the best 10 players to ever play football at Georgia. And I'm very bullish on him. To me, you cannot have enough of DeAndre Swift running behind Andrew Thomas if you can get there.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, sometimes it's too hard to get there.
Yeah.
But you saw what they did last week. They had the defensive end, 4 yards off of Andrew Thomas's left shoulder.
And then stunts behind it.
And then they running 2 guys through the A-gap right after that, and the outside linebacker is to that guy's inside. You're like, there's going to be 4 guys coming right at Andrew Thomas on his left and his right. And they sent the 2 guys through the B gap, not the A. Yeah. And he's like, well, how many of those can he block at a time? So, hey, then, there's Isaiah Wilson on the other side. That might be a good idea to run behind his big butt. So I would do that. Jeff Boyle says chemistry is key in the quarterback wide receiver production. Jeff Boyle is correct. Chris Rich asks, why not use James Cook more in the slot? Chris, if we knew the answer to that, we'd probably be making a lot of money.
Here's the thing about that, though. There's something. No matter what the answer is, it's something because he's just not on the field.
I don't know. If you want to keep him here next year, better get his butt on the field. I'm not saying that I've heard anything. I'm just saying if I'm a 5-star running back and I'm getting 1 touch a game, there are a lot of schools that will give me 16, 18, 20, 22 carries. It's not like the family's hurting for money. It's like, hey, I'll go sit at this other school for a year, and then I'll be the guy. Give James Cook the damn ball. We talk about getting him in space. That is a guy who does great in space. Let's see it. And I could be wrong. Maybe he doesn't. But it sure seems that what we've seen in the past is that is a guy who can break open a game. I'm not saying he's better than Swift. Not at all. Swift is your back. Give him the carries. And I understand that Brian Herrion's, years ahead, and Brian's done nothing to have himself removed from the field. But it just seems like when James Cook's in the game, everyone knows he's getting it. He's not. Honestly, I would just look at what Texas A&M was doing with those two backs. I'm like, man.
He's half the touches this year, by the way. Like, he's got half the touches he got as a freshman.
What's the line between not enough and too much, though? And I know it's like way more than what he's getting now, so I'm not saying that. But we know for a fact that one of the recruiting pitches for Georgia when they go recruit running backs is you can come here and play with 2 or 3 other stars and be ready for the NFL and not be worn out, not have your career ruined for too many carries.
Yeah, I mean, they pointed out to him and others, we had this kid come in at the last minute named Brian Herrion. He got on the field as a true freshman when we had Nick Chubb and Sony Michel in the backfield. And he's been able to play, and, he'll be a junior this year. When you come in, as a freshman, then your sophomore year, he'll be a senior. And then, you 2 years after that, of course, most of them say in your third year before you go to the NFL, because all these kids are thinking that. So if you're going to use them to do the pitch, you got to get a little bit better there.
Why don't you ask that question, Brent?
So let's see. I think that's actually a good one. Electric City Dog.
Been around a long time.
Yeah. Also, is it just me, or do we match up with LSU way better than any other team that could have made the SEC championship game? I think that's a yes. That's a
any
100,
other team in the East? Yeah.
That's a 100% yes. And I'm fascinated by that game already, and it's not even here. But we got to get this week first and take care of business.
I will say Florida played them tough, though.
And for a half, but LSU in that game scored 42 points on like 48 plays, and that's when you think about from a PFF grading standpoint, and some of the things that Burrow has done this year are very Baker Mayfield-esque in terms of his 1 or 2 in all these various categories that we track, specifically on throws over 10 yards. His down the field game is beyond anyone that is playing college football right now. And we saw, and we pointed out this week in Film Don't Lie that it's one play. You saw one play in the game this past week against Texas A&M that I think you're going to see a lot of that look in the SEC championship game. So it's going to be a fun matchup to talk about.
The team that's matched up the best with LSU has been Auburn.
Yes.
And Georgia proved that their defense is right there with
100%.
Auburn. And not many teams can say that because I think Auburn is definitely one of the top 5 defenses in the country.
And, that game, when you think about what Auburn was able to do offensively, a lot of times was Seth Williams just going up and being bigger and stronger than what LSU was going against. And that's why you need a Lawrence Cager.
That's why you needed George Pickens. And you saw those 2 deep-ish. One was very deep. The other was, open on the sideline, and he caught it. Yeah. You're seeing Pickens getting more of that downfield action.
Yeah, let's see what Georgia can do against Jamar Chase. That'll be a fun matchup.
I'll say
the entire matchup it's so much fun and scary.
I know there's a lot of it. It's just
fun and scary at the same time.
That particular one, I'll be very excited to see. Hopefully a healthy Eric Stokes against Jamar Chase. That'll be something you'll see.
Hopefully healthy. That's a thing. He's going to be okay. I think he talked about that yesterday.
Yeah, I expect Eric Stokes is fine. I think he had a stinger.
Yeah.
And
precautionary thing
because of where it was. They took him to the hospital, had him checked out, and he's later that night he's dancing around on Snapchat to a rap song I didn't know. So
here is one point though about just the schedule this week and kind of looking ahead to LSU, which I know Kirby doesn't want to do, but that's why we can. If Georgia gets to a point against Georgia Tech that Georgia can rest starters in the second half, LSU will not have that luxury against Texas A&M.
100% no.
They will get beat up more by Texas A&M than what Georgia Tech should be able to do against Georgia. That may be helpful.
And Kirby has a lot of respect for Jeff Collins.
Has a lot of respect.
A lot of respect.
A lot of respect. So much respect for Jeff Collins.
And what he's trying to build there. That was a fascinating video, by the way. Fascinating video.
I want to give a big shout out to our friends at Academia Brewing Company. They have a Black Friday weekend special. Take 20% off any 4-pack to go. So if you want to get their Hyperdesiac, their IQ IPA, the Skull here at Champions on Back Street is $4. So you can come here and have this fantastic patty melt. But it's got the fresh jalapenos on it.
That's impressive.
The bread is phenomenal. Come here and have especially after you've had days and days of turkey, you want to get something different. Champions' place, but the fantastic beer. If you have someone in your life who is a beer aficionado or anybody who just likes good beer, swing out by Academia Brewing Company. They have the Black Friday weekend special, 20% off any of their 4-packs. If you're taking it to go, it's a fantastic deal. Again, we're very thankful for them being sponsors because this is a company. When I went out and talked to Matt Casey, he is I know he's got 1 degree from Georgia. He may have 2. I think he may have a master's or something. Guy who is a gigantic Georgia fan who is said, hey, we're doing a podcast. He jumped all over it. It helps us if you go out there and eat at his fantastic restaurant. Remember, he is a chef. It's not just a brew company, and there's a lot of places that they make good beer, decent beer, and you go out there and you're looking for something to eat, and they're dropping some frozen chicken fingers into a vat of ancient oil. And they're like, hey, here's our snacks. No, they actually have a chef out at Academia Brewing Company. They do fantastic work out there. One of the best places to eat in town, bar none. Then throw on top of that the best beer you'll ever taste in your life.
I love their flatbreads, man.
Yeah.
Their lunch flatbreads.
Oh, my God.
So good.
That's pretty good. So some of the best food I've eaten in town was actually at a brewing company. It boggles your mind, It's like, oh, well, we need to go downtown and eat at, these fancy restaurants. We need to go the Last Resort. Last Resort, I've eaten there. That's great, but I guarantee you're going to find a wider variety if you go to Academia Brewing Company. So a big shout out to them.
It's Athens. Follow the beer, man.
And of course, also while we're talking food, I know you're going to get tired of turkey. Swing by our friends at Europie. That's what we had on this last week's show when we did the watch along.
That's the perfect Friday, right?
It's a perfect Friday.
The day
I'm
after.
just saying, to me, Saturday for the game. Coach John and his wife had the pasta, the penny pasta, where it's custom. You say, well, I want this in there, I want that, I want that, I want that. She had that. I had the pizza. Coach Don had a pizza, loved it. It is so customized. You just walk in and say, and it's not every topping you add, well, that's another $1.50. No, it's the same price. You can have it piled up that high or as simple as possible. So fantastic food at Europie. I spoke to, I was sending Drew French, the guy that started the whole thing, he and his wife Natalie. Again, Georgia graduates. Mm-hmm. Told him what we're going to do. We didn't even give him the option. I went into his office and said, hey, you're sponsoring our podcast. He's like, okay.
Sure.
I'm like, where do I send the bill? He's like, down the hall. So it's just
that's true.
Drew, again, I met him when he had one store. They now have 72 locations.
Wow. And
they're opening more. So if you want to start the new year off right, you don't like your job, call Drew French and get a franchise out there at Europie and make $1 jillion.
They are, too.
Any other
I've
questions?
seen the lines. Let's see. There was one from Facebook. Just generally, this is from Phil Rogers. How do we match up with Georgia Tech?
They're a 29-point favorite. I think you're going to pound it down the throat. I think the question that
quite well.
I don't know if I'd bet that, though.
No, not until you see Georgia do it. But again,
no, exactly.
I made this prediction against Texas A&M. And I'll probably make it again this week. I'll probably take Georgia. I thought that Georgia and Texas A&M would cover it, but I said that, just assuming that there wouldn't be a rainy day. I am going to be bullish on Georgia again this week because I think that eventually, with that much talent on the field, we keep talking about how they're one half block away, one shoestring tackle, one
perfect throw,
one missed assignment, a couple perfect throws. They left so many points on the field this past week. At least by my count, like at least 16 points. We saw that week before. Points left on the field. There's no game in which you should be kicking 4 field goals for this Georgia team. I think they will get it together. They have played some very good defenses. This is not a great defense. I think the offense clicks, gets its crap together, and everyone's a bit more bullish on Georgia going into the LSU game because the offense, this will be a good confidence builder for them. Or they could struggle. And we're here next week, gnashing our teeth and wondering why they can't get their shit together.
When I say one perfect throw, I literally think the margins are that thin. I think that entire Texas A&M game is different if that flea flicker connects for a touchdown. Because I don't think A&M at that point can play defense like they were. I think that they would have to respect Georgia over the top more than they did virtually the rest of the game. Now, some of that was at weather, some of that Jake Fromm, whatever it is. Roddy, you said going into last week, you thought that this was the week that Georgia's offense finally gets it together.
Yeah, because we've seen them do it in the past. It's not like it's been an entire season-long thing. There were times, and again, it hasn't been each week. We've said they haven't quite got it together, but they're going to, and we keep seeing the flashes. Eventually, they have to put it all together. Now, maybe they go the entire season and don't, and they're dumped out of the SEC championship, or they're dumped out of the first round of the playoffs. I could see it, but sometimes they make it look effortless. And I'm like, you can't go from having such a great home run play to having complete ineptitude. If you just average that out, you're a 28 to 35 point team per game, and that's what we haven't seen.
I mean, in terms of yards gained, South Carolina was a really explosive offensive performance, but turnovers and missed opportunities soured that game. I do think this is the week that Georgia's offense puts it together. I'm expecting 35, 38 points, somewhere in there.
But again, it's not going to tell you anything about how they're going to fare against LSU.
No.
But again, LSU.
Feel better, though.
But you'll feel better.
You'll feel better.
And you'll probably be overconfident going into LSU.
I don't think that'll happen.
Nah, but to be fair, LSU does not have the defense that you saw against Missouri. Missouri had a very good defense. Auburn, Texas A&M. There's some good defenses out there. LSU is not one of them. So.
I put this stat out there yesterday because I thought it was interesting. The national narrative is that LSU is by far and away the best team in the SEC, that Georgia has no chance to compete against LSU. If you just look at point differential in conference games this year, LSU was plus 130, Georgia's plus 118. And that that's going to skew probably a little bit more for LSU after their A&M game, because I do expect them to win that game. But in terms of most points scored in SEC games, LSU, of course, 327 points. But the fewest allowed, Georgia, giving up 84. The fewest amount of points allowed in conference play since 2011, when LSU and Alabama gave up 69 points for the whole year.
And
that's
what's
ridiculous.
Amazing
that's
about
just
the
ridiculous
defensive performance, I think I looked yesterday. I think they're last in the FBS in terms of number of turnovers created.
Yeah.
Last. And I asked Patrick Garvin, and I'm going to ask Dave here after the show, has there ever been a defense that's given up that few points per game while also being that low and that from a turnover standpoint?
Well, that's a good point, because Kirby Smart said we got to get better in all phases of the game, and he was right. But someone said, in the press conference yesterday, raised their hand and said, "Coach, well, what does your defense need to do better?" And he pointed out, before the question was almost done being asked, he's like, turnovers. And to be fair, Georgia's had to drive the field a lot. They're winning field position games with their kickers, but it would be a lot. You saw, they had one last week, the LeCount fumble that was within a gnat's eyelash of being called, the runner being called down. So you cannot hope for that against LSU in the championship game. You've got to get some of these turnovers, and they've had a few, but not many at all. And so that's a good point. Is the defense is doing yeoman's work without all the turnovers. But here's one thing that we also don't point out: Jake Fromm struggles last few weeks. No turnovers from him either.
Turnovers.
So what is his job? Number one, protect the ball. Guaranteed. As Kirby Smart will tell him every time, your job, first thing you do is protect the ball.
He actually said that. I saw the SEC Inside from the Auburn game, and right before they were going out for the second half, defense, he said something, and then he said offense, keep protecting the ball, or something of that nature.
It's Kirby Smart's number one priority.
Yep.
Number one. Before you decide if you're going to run it, you're going to pass it, or whatever the hell you're going to do, his job is ball protection, field position, then get into play calling.
That field position is such a key part of this, though, and it's the faith that Georgia has not only in Rodrigo Blankenship, that he can kick field goals and he can kick the ball out of the end zone on kickoffs, but on Jake Camarda for how well he's been playing. Coach Donnan tells us every Saturday that 1 of 6 plays is a kick, and so Georgia's so good in that, and Georgia's defense is playing at such a high level. It's probably the smart thing to do with that. You're going to win more football games if you are leaning a bit more conservative offensively.
Yep.
Now, you can't completely stop. You just can't run it up the middle for 2 yards a down. That's not going to work.
No.
But that's why the mentality of this team is what it is. It's a lot like, people have been saying this, the Alabama teams early in Nick Saban's tenure with Kirby Smart.
Yep. Shout out to Jonathan Williams. He said he had a great time watching UGA Sports live at Champies today in Athens. We appreciate it. Jonathan Williams.
Awesome.
So, guys, it's we've run a little long here. You guys talk too much.
Sorry.
That's
we get paid by the word, right?
So you get to take that patty. You get to take a quarter of that patty melt sandwich home. That's your payment for being here today.
Better than nothing.
Hey, I'll take the patty melt if you.
No, you're the
Champions,
new guy.
worth it.
You get nothing.
Okay.
No,
even better.
They'll. The folks here at Champions always make sure that we're well fed, and they put out some nice food for us, and we really appreciate that. We're going to break for now. We want to tell everybody, be careful this Thanksgiving. Be careful with the holidays. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your families. We were talking about our sponsors, how thankful we are to them. Athens Ford, Aaron Overhead Doors, Your Pie, Academia Brewing Company, 365 Game Day, Champies, 11 Alive. 11 Alive, our partners in this whole enterprise. So big shout out to them. If you're watching this on the 11 Alive page, please give them a like on that page. We'd appreciate it. But we're very thankful for what we get to do. We're thankful for everybody at the UGA Sports, all the members there. Without them, we would have to get real jobs like these two guys have. I'd have to, work for a living. Don't ever want to do that. So thanks to everyone at UGA Sports for being members. We truly, truly appreciate it. It is not boilerplate. We just don't say, hey, thank you. We mean it from the bottom of our hearts that we just can't tell you how much we appreciate the fact that you let us do this for a living. It means everything to us. So I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. For Brent Rollins and Dayne Young, I'm Ryan DeBulsey. We will talk to you next Tuesday.